Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to our webinar. We are very excited to talk about clinical trials and give a lot of background information for those that are a little bit newer, maybe to the rare disease community, or are interested in learning about clinical trials and all kind of the frequently asked questions. I think a lot of what we're going to be covering today. To start out, I'm joined by Nina, our CEO and co-founder. Nina, I would love for you to be able to introduce yourself, maybe start with your role at the company, and we're going to get into, the inspiration in terms of your family of why you started it. But for those that haven't met you before, you're the CEO and co-founder, as I mentioned. But what's your role, kind of everyday tasks that you're involved with at No Rare?
Well, I kind of work on connecting people, figuring out how to make connections to researchers, how to find information on rare disease to be able to convey that to people with rare diseases. Because what happened to me was I was always in marketing and always in healthcare. And then one day, my daughter gave birth to a child, and while she was still pregnant, she found out he had an ultra rare disease. So once he was born, I was like everybody else, no matter how much I knew about healthcare and how much I knew about marketing or clinical trials, I was at square one, just like everybody else is, because his disease is so rare. There's no research being done on it. There's no information on it. There are no specialists who specialize it. It took him 2 years to get the diagnosis because they just found a diagnostic tool for the genetic mutation that's causing his rare disease. And he's doing okay right now, but it's always learn as you go along. But what happened was when he was born, and my daughter found out she has a child with a rare disease, and he needed a lot of surgeries, and a lot of her friends heard about it too. All of a sudden, a lot of people started reaching out to her, and they were telling that her, people that she knew or friends of friends, all who had a child who also had a rare disease. And they were looking for a clinical trial to get their child into because most of them have been told when you have a child who's born with these diseases, a lot of times the doctor will say to you, well, I don't know what to tell you to do, so just go home and enjoy your child as best as you can. And for a lot of mothers, that's not an acceptable answer. So they went out and tried to do the research. One of my daughter's friends came to her because her daughter was suffering from Dravet syndrome, which involves a lot of epileptic seizures, and they were really terrible. And the child was basically about a year old when she started having it, and she had four other kids. And not only was the disease affecting the child's growth and development, it was affecting the entire family. And she really wanted to find some kind of answer. So because she knew I was in healthcare and I know how to navigate the system a little better, she asked me if I could help her find a clinical trial. What I found was when I asked her, what trial do you want to go into? She had no idea that there were differences in clinical trials, that there are different phases of clinical trials. So there's clinical trials at the very beginning phase, which is phase 1, and then there are clinical trials that are at the end phase, which is phase 3, which is when they're right about to get approval from the FDA to become distributed. So if you're choosing a trial, you may want to know what stage that trial is in before you decide whether or not you want to participate in that. So that's just one thing. Then there are trials that are just trials to understand the disease state where you don't have to take a special medication, but by participating, you're going to be studied by the experts in the field. So one thing I think we all learn when you have a child with a rare disease or you yourself have a rare disease, as I found out I did also, is that there are only very few doctors around in the entire world who know anything about your disease. And often to get to see them is really, really difficult. Now, if you happen to be lucky enough to live near a big academic center, let's say in Boston, and you have millions of these expert doctors who are all over the place who you can try to get to see, and you're a local doctor and you can see them all the time, that's one thing. But for most people, that's not the case. And it's very hard to find somebody who knows anything about your disease. So the only hope, and this is what my daughter's friend said, was she wanted to get into a clinical trial because at least she'd get to see, she knew somebody was a big expert in Chicago, and she wanted to get to see this expert. And even her pediatric neurologist, who she was seeing all the time, was trying to get in touch with this guy. But, when there are so few experts and a lot of people who have the disease, it's very hard to get to see them. And the wait list could be months. So she knew if she could get into a study, eventually she'd get to see him not only once, but be able to come under his care regularly. And she was even willing to move to Chicago for the time period of the study because she really needed some answers. Well, I looked up the trials that were on. There's a listing of clinical trials on the FDA website called clinicaltrials.gov. And if you ever gone there, you'll see it's really difficult to navigate. It was difficult to me, and I know how to use it. So I found a bunch of studies that I thought she might qualify for, and I emailed. They have an email address usually on the bottom where you can email and you'll get, and they'll help you connect you. Well, when we emailed all these different studies and all these different people, not one response came back to us. Not to us, not to her pediatric neurologist. So she was just going nowhere. And that's when I realized for the first time how difficult it was for somebody who wants to get into clinical trial. Because, I had been working for companies who were trying to find people for clinical trials. And all they'd tell me was, oh, it's so hard to find people to participate in clinical trials. We can't find anybody who wants to participate. And then here I am trying to get somebody who's desperate to participate, who really wants to participate, and she can't get a response from anybody. So I figured there's something wrong here, that one side is going one way and trying very hard to get people into studies, and the other side are people trying to get into studies and they can't find them and they can't get contacted to them. So that's why we realized there was a really big unmet need, and we were living it, and we had a lot of friends who were living it, and we wanted to help. And because I have the background in pharma marketing and I knew how to contact these companies, I realized if I could contact the companies and find out about the clinical studies and provide access to people about these studies, so let people know about their studies, so it's not reliant on the pharma company or the medical doctors who don't have time to publicize clinical trials. So at least we could try to help get these people, connect the two dots, get the people who want to get the studies done and get the people in who want to participate in the studies, because you can't rely on your ordinary doctor to let you know about clinical trials because frankly they don't know about them either. So it's up to you, and that's something I think we've all learned living with a rare disease.
You and the No Rare team are really the matchmakers between people that have rare diseases that are looking to enroll in these clinical trials and the clinical trial coordinators themselves, like the PIs, that are trying to find patients to help. And you're connecting, as you said, you're connecting those dots, and that is just so valuable and completely makes sense that there was this need, especially in the rare disease community, because as you said, a lot of people, there's only a few experts or maybe even one expert in the world. A lot of them, luckily for us, are in the United States, but to be able to actually get care for them is so important. And I want to pick out one thing that you said is that there are different phases of clinical trials. And I think we're going to get into that in this webinar of those different phases and knowing it's very important to know, well, what are you getting into? But also that there are these natural history studies, which you talked about a little bit, where you're part of this and we're learning about the condition, but you're not being given any specific new treatment that's being tested. It's really just being able to give that baseline information, but how valuable is that to be paired with and the person that's looking after you or your child or the person that you're taking care of that has the rare disease, for them to be followed by the expert or one of the few experts in the world. You guys are people that are doing this. So for people that are listening, you can, comment below. We will connect with you personally, and, you'll talk with some of the people that are on the webinar today. So thank you, Nina. I think that creates such a good understanding of what are the issues out there and how No Rare is helping.
Yeah, and I would just want to say about these studies are called, some of the studies where there's a drug being given to you is called an interventional study. So it's a study where they're testing a new medication that they're trying to see whether it works and whether it's safe and effective. So the different phases are designed to take that progress. So the first phase is testing to see how safe it is. What are the side effects you can expect it? The second study is to see how effective it is. Is it more effective than a placebo, which means a sugar pill, a fake drug? So what they do is they give you like a water treatment, because our natural ability is sometimes if you believe you're getting a medication, you're going to get better just because you believe you're getting a medication. So in order for the drug to be proved to be effective, it has to be better than that. So the second stage is really to see, is it better than this sugar pill, which you believe to be, you don't know if it is or not, but is it better among the people who take it than the sugar pill? And then the third phase is when they expand to try to get as many people as possible in the study so they can see that whatever they saw in the first two studies, that it's big enough, it's replicated over time. So the same effect is going on for a lot of people. For a drug, they have to be able to see that whatever the effect of the drug is, A, it's safe, and B, it's more effective than what's out there. And the good news is a lot of people say, well, I don't want to get a sugar pill, then I'm not going to be treated. And what will happen to me if I get the sugar pill and I don't get the real drug? Well, in rare disease, because everybody, it's a ethical decision for doctors. They can't let somebody go untreated. Whatever you're usually being treated with, and a lot of people are being treated with steroids or immunosuppressants or other kind of drugs, whatever drug you're usually on, they let you stay on the drug that is most recommended in that disease state, and they add the new drug on top of it. So the goal is to see whether this new drug is going to be incrementally better than what's already out there. So when they say placebo, they have a group of people that are just taking the standard of care and a sugar pill, and a group of people are taking the standard of care and the new drug. And they want to see that the group of people taking the standard of care, the normal drug, plus this new drug, if they're doing significantly better than the people taking the standard of care and the sugar pill, then they know the drug is effective. And then the next step is to go to phase 3 and see with more people, are they getting the same results? Now, in contrary to that is the observational study. So for a lot of people, not like my daughter's friend who wanted access to a new drug, she wanted a new drug, there are a lot of people who just would like you to say, who would like to be seen by a specialist on a regular basis, but right now they don't want to rock the boat because they're taking medication that's working for them, things are under control, they don't want to change anything else, but they still want that expert opinion to be watching them and to see what's going on. Now, from the researcher side, from these experts, these specialists in these diseases, in most of the diseases we're talking about, there are not a lot of studies being done. So when they try to do a clinical trial, the FDA is requiring them to have enough information about that disease in order to create a clinical trial. How do you create a clinical trial if you don't know how it's affecting people on a day-to-day basis? Or what drugs they're taking on a day-to-day basis. So an observational study is a study where they just work with people who are being seen by their regular doctor and their regular treatment, and they're really observing them. A specialist, an expert in the field, is observing their day-to-day lives and recording it. And that way, when they want to design a clinical study for a treatment, it'll be realistic to the way people live within that disease state, and they'll know, oh, people with this people with this disease can have, 2 attacks a month, or people with this disease can have 8 attacks a month. So they can characterize what the disease is once they understand it, and then they can do a study that will work with, that will establish what they have to accomplish. Because if it's a disease where people have 8 attacks during a month, maybe the drug will reduce the attacks by half and they'll only have 4. But if maybe it'll go from 4 to 0. They don't know, but they have to know what they're talking about. They have to know how long. You need a baseline. They also have to know how long the study should last. How are they going to know how long to test this drug if they don't know enough about how it works day to day in people? So these observational studies are not only helpful for you in the immediate present time, because you're being observed by the top guys in the field who are watching you on a monthly basis and seeing what's going on while what you're being treated, what your symptoms are, what your reactions are. But you're also helping those top guys develop a new treatment and create a clinical trial so they can get that treatment approved for everybody in the disease state. So that's why it's doubly important to get involved in those kind of studies. But it gives options so that if when you're told you have a rare disease and you're told, like most of us, 95% of us are told, guess what? There is no treatment. We can deal with the symptoms, but there's no cure. There's nothing going to change. Well, you want to do something. So at least you can do this. At least you can move the needle a little bit and move researchers a little bit closer to finding a treatment or a cure for your disease.
Yeah, I think that is just so helpful. I really like how you've explained everything.
I also want to say that first lady that I talked about, who we started No Rare because of her, she finally did get her child into a clinical trial. That was a phase 3, so it was right before it was getting approved, and her child did a lot better, and then was able to actually go to school, and was doing very well for a long time. And then the drug got approved, and she was able to get her child access to the drug on a long-term basis. So the other thing is, when you're in a clinical trial, even if you got the placebo in one part of the trial, and that they usually have an extension part of the trial, or they let you, because you were in the study, get access to the medication if you're doing well on it, or at least trying it. So, even after it's proved, like even a lot of people in our team, even our financial advisor has been in a clinical trial for a rare heart condition he has. And after the trial was over and the drug got approved, he was able to get the drug at a very discounted rate because he participated in the clinical trial. So it does help you get access to these new medications very quickly, and also in a way that you can afford sometimes as well.
Yeah, there are just so many advantages on both sides of people that are enrolling in clinical trials and also on the researcher side to be able to understand so much more about the condition. So it's really a win-win for everybody, I think, with clinical trials. And I'm so glad we're able to offer this webinar so that we can debunk a lot of myths and just provide more information on just in general how it works. So thank you so much for helping me open this up.
Thanks. Yeah, we think it's important. Joining a clinical trial may not be for everybody, but if you want to find out about how to participate, if you want to be a part of a clinical trial, if you want to come under the care of some of these top specialists in your disease or your child's rare disease, it is an avenue to explore and to try and to learn about. And the biggest thing that when you join a clinical trial, if you do a clinical trial, the first thing they have you do is sign a document that says informed consent. And we're all about the informed. You can't go forward unless you're informed. And what we're trying to do, that's why we called ourselves No Rare, because we want people to know what your options are. Be informed about things. Don't just sit there, because there's nobody else out there who's going to help you except yourself. You really have to find out the information yourself. And we learned, the people on our team either have a family member with a rare disease or have cared for it. We have nurses who have worked in clinical trials, who've worked with people in clinical trials, or we have people whose family members who have rare disease and have looked for clinical trials. So we know where you're coming from. We know what it's like to want to participate. My two brothers tried to participate in clinical trials. They both had cancer, and they weren't able to get into them. So I know what it's like when you're trying to find a solution and you can't. But that's why when we're not perfect, we don't always find the right match for a person, because we don't want to send somebody to a study, to a clinical trial, to a researcher, and that person isn't qualified for the study. So that's a waste of the person's time, and it's also a waste of the nurse's time, who doesn't have a lot of time to waste. So we try to make sure that we make a really good match, that we're really, like you said, we're a matchmaker. We're trying to make sure we give the right people to the right study. And whatever study it is, we'll try to get you as fast as you can. And even if you don't qualify for one study, you're still able to qualify for another. And you're able to learn more about your disease and who the specialists are along the way.
Nina, thanks so much for explaining a little bit more here. I want to give people an overview of what happens when they contact No Rare, or, they leave a message with us and one of us gets back to them. Just a short overview so that people kind of know what to expect in terms of that workflow and how that initial conversation starts.
What we learned and what we want to convey is, when somebody contacts us, you're talking to a human being who knows where you're coming from. And that person is there to help you. We're not going to give you details about the study because we don't know them. We're only here to help facilitate your contacting one of these researchers, these study sites with these specialists in your disease, so that they can see if you're a fit match for the study. However, when you do contact one of our people who have all been nurses or worked in clinical study environments, they'll ask you a couple of questions to build a profile of you, so we know who you are and what kind of study you're looking for, where you live, how much you want to travel, things like that. And that's how we match you to a study. So you'll get called from one of our people, and they will really talk to you and hear what your needs are. And that's our goal. Like I said, we're going to be the matchmakers, and we're going to find the right place or the right study for you and offer those to you. And you can make the decision whether you want to participate or not. Or if you need help, I mean, we've helped some people who live out of the country, even help them get visas so they could come into this country and get into a study. So, we didn't do it for them, but we advised them on how to do that. We advised them on how to get your medical records from one doctor to another. I mean, we'll do that. We'll give you articles, we'll give you tools, anything you need that help you interact better with your doctor so you can get to a study. Because our team is standing by waiting for you, and they know what you have to do, and they know what has to be done on the clinical study end. And they're going to try to bridge that gap for you to make sure that it's very easy for you and you feel good about contacting a research site for a clinical trial.
Well, Nina, thank you so much. We've had such incredible insight throughout this webinar, and a big part of it is just you sharing your personal story, how No Rare was founded, and how we're able to be, as we were saying earlier, like matchmakers and guidance counselors, really through this process of clinical trials and making sure that it truly is a match for people and getting to know people, on a one-on-one basis. Is there any other, words of wisdom or thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Yes, sure. I really think that if you really feel you want to try to do something, you want to learn something, you want to speak to the experts in your disease who might know something about it, it's worth looking into, getting informed about the clinical studies that are out there in your disease. Tali, my daughter's friend, whose daughter participated in the clinical trial, well, the medication's not working anymore, and she's looking for another one.
We thought it would be helpful to review some of the concepts we learned in today's webinar. So the first up is observational studies. So as we learned from Nina, this is a study for researchers to simply observe the realities of day-to-day living with a rare disease over time. This is also referred to as natural history studies because it can show how a disease can progress over time in terms of those first signs and symptoms to then how it changes or progresses over time. So the way this works is that participants follow their normal schedule of visits and stay on their current medications. Participants also receive feedback through surveys, and the really big highlight here is it's simply observing. So there's no investigational medication or treatment given. Now, the other type is interventional studies. So this is a study to evaluate the safety and efficacy of a treatment or therapy for a specific disease. So this time we actually are evaluating the new drug or treatment, and it's done over 3 different phases. Phase 1 is to test for the safety. Phase 2 is with a small number of participants, but we'll test to see if the drug actually makes a difference. And then phase 3, that's this last phase before it's approved, and this is to test the drug on more people to ensure the results from that phase 2 is proven again in this larger group of people. I mentioned on the last slide that the big focus of interventional studies is to evaluate the new drug and compare it to a placebo. So this is how we're able to say, all right, is the drug actually making a difference? And for those that don't remember, a placebo is a sugar pill that looks like the study drug but has no active drug in it. So the participants don't know whether they actually are on that investigational drug or if they're just on a sugar pill. So in rare disease studies, most of the time the study drug is added to the usual treatment. So participants who get the placebo are still being treated with their usual treatment for the disease. So most of the time you don't have to give up what has been working for you in the past. You're just adding on either the placebo or this new investigational drug. Here's another important piece. Those participants who get that placebo, that sugar pill, in the treatment period of the study usually have the opportunity to try the study drug afterwards in an extension to the study. So that's another advantage to being part of an interventional study. Even if you get the placebo and things then go well in terms of this clinical trial, then you can have access potentially to that investigational drug before other people. This is where to pay attention, right? All caps. Most important to know. Everything is bolded. Participation is totally voluntary, and you can quit the study at any time without penalty. So If you, your loved one, are in a clinical trial and you're experiencing it and for some reason it's just not working for you, you can leave the clinical trial without any penalty. Researchers in rare disease studies are usually the most knowledgeable specialists about the disease, and you're going to come under their care on a regular basis for the period of the study. So this is a fantastic way to have the leaders of that disorder be following you or your loved one. So that's a really important piece. I really want to make sure that people are picking out of this, even when it's that observational study that we talked about in that first slide. It's really advantageous to be under the care of the leaders in the world for that condition. In each type of study, by participating, you're helping find an effective treatment or even a potential cure. So you are contributing to scientific advancement, and specifically in this disease that other people are affected by. As we said earlier in the webinar, if you want to learn more, please contact a member of the Know Rare support team to learn about the studies we know about, both the observational, the first one I talked about, and the interventional, the second one I talked about. What's great about connecting with our Know Rare support team is that we have connections with researchers and we can facilitate that relationship. And it's really helpful just to learn about these clinical trials and see if there's even a fit for you. And I think it's really helpful that you actually get to talk one-on-one to people. It is not an automated answer, anything like that. So please reach out, knowrare.com/contact-us. Again, that's knowrare.com/contact-us. We can't wait to connect with you and teach you even more on a one-on-one basis about clinical trials and what could fit for you. I really encourage people to, if you want to leave a comment, if you want to have that be public, that's fine. If you'd rather direct message us, you can DM us. You can also contact us. Nina mentioned knowrare.com/contact-us. So again, that's knowrare.com/contact-us, so that you can send us a private message there. So please just reach out. Kelly, Andrea, and other team members are just waiting to be able to connect with you, learn about you, and see how we can best help you. So thank you everybody for tuning in. We've really enjoyed providing you this information. Hopefully you can see how passionate everybody is at educating people in our rare disease community. So thank you so much. Thank you, Nina, to everybody that has shared a lot of wisdom and advice in this webinar. So really appreciate it. And head over to knowrare.com. Thank you so much, Nina.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Nice talking to you.